All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the ACLU of Delaware annual meeting. My name is Mike Brickner. I am the new Executive Director of the ACLU of Delaware. And I am new to Delaware, but I am not new to the ACLU. Prior to coming here to Delaware, I was active with the ACLU for 14 years in Ohio and had a variety of roles. These have been new and challenging times, hence why we are having for the first time, a virtual annual meeting. We have a lot of challenges in this country right now. Number one, we're in the midst of a global pandemic, and COVID-19 has brought a whole range of concerns across civil liberties. Right now, here in Delaware, we're seeing a crisis in our state prisons where at the Sussex Correctional Institution just this week it was announced that 1 in 3 prisoners have tested positive for COVID-19. We are also still grappling with the generational and historical education inequity in the state, and we have our attorneys and our organizers who are working to correct those issues. But that those have only exacerbated because of COVID-19. And now we are in a place where we're entering into a new school year and we don't yet know what school is going to look like in the next month or two. We are also in the midst of perhaps the most consequential presidential election in our lifetimes this year as well. And navigating that in a global pandemic of how we can make our voices heard at the ballot box, but still be able to cast a vote safely and securely, and so that no person has to choose between their health and their right to vote. And then lastly, the other challenge that we have seen is the other epidemic in our country, which is racism. That in the past 2 months, we have seen protests and people who have been speaking out, fueled by the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, where we are calling out for reforms to the way that we look at policing, to the way that our justice system works, and that these are all major challenges for our organization. But I'm here to tell you that I feel as though I am in no greater place than to be here at the ACLU of Delaware. And you are going to hear from some of the most committed civil libertarians and experts on all of these issues tonight about how the ACLU of Delaware is rising to the occasion and is helping to protect and expand our rights right here in the first state. Let me give you a little bit of the logistics for tonight. So we are going to hear from some of our board leadership. So our outgoing president is going to speak about some of the new board members who are coming onto our board of directors and talk a little bit about the work that we've done. In addition, you're going to hear from our incoming board president about the work that she's hoping that we're going to do. And you're also going to hear from our treasurer about our financial situation and all the work that we've done to make sure that the ACLU of Delaware is going to be a strong organization, not just today, but long into the future. Then you're going to hear from staff. And again, these are the experts working on justice reform, on voting rights, on education, who are going to be talking about our responses to these really critical civil liberties issues. This is a virtual annual meeting, which is a little strange for a lot of us. So let me just go over a little bit of what to expect too from how the technology is going to work. You're all muted and the videos are off by default, but we do have a really nice chat feature in the bottom. Feel free to chat. We would really love for you to pose questions in the chat. We're going to have time for Q&A at the end. If you're watching on Facebook, you can also post questions or comments on Facebook Live, and our staff is monitoring that, and we will use that for the questions and answers. You're also going to see that the staff are going to be asking you here on Zoom poll questions, and so you're going to be able to select your answers for those polls. If you're on Facebook, you can also put that answer in the chat on Facebook. And again, we are streaming live on Facebook right now. So we are all live right here on the internet. With that, I'm very glad to welcome all of you, and I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Jacobson, our outgoing board president. Thanks, Catherine.
I found out a very cool thing about Zoom last week, and it's not how cool it is because everyone's tired of it, but and that is that if you press your space bar, you can unmute yourself temporarily. But if you let go, then you look like a fool. I wanted to see if we move the slide further. I'm there. I wanted to thank all of the members of the staff for hard work and an especially difficult year. Of course, they're all listed there: Angela Harris, DeBard McGriff, Dwayne Bensing, Javon Rich, Karen Lance, Mike Brickner, the newest, Morgan Keller, Shannon Griffin, and Suchi Eingard. I also want to mention Dave Beaver, the prior development director and interim executive director. He did a great job this year. Erica Marshall, the Smart Justice campaign manager, who has gone to, I think Washington State or Idaho or some really far place, and far to me anyway. And Ryan Tack Hooper, the prior legal director, and all of those folks have our hearty thanks. Now we'll move on to the board members, or I don't know exactly what the next, yes. So the board of directors, I've offered them our thanks as well. You'll note that some of their tenures have finished, and I am very thankful to all of them for the amount of work they put in. It's been a difficult year for them as well. As I'm often reminding my spouse, who is an executive director at a nonprofit, don't lose patience with your board. It's what they do after they finish their jobs. So be especially thankful for the work that all of these people put in to help the ACLU of Delaware. Next slide. I feel like that thing in high school, where it's in my high school, because when I went to high school, we had slides. But anyway, I want to welcome our new board members. I don't have a real good way to have you approve them, but I'm going to assume in our virtual land here that they are approved. And Ariel Gruswitz and Hanif Salam. Gruswitz, I think I pronounced that incorrectly. We're very pleased to have them on the board. It's going to be their first year, and welcome. And one final slide, I think, for me. We'll move that along. There we are. The outgoing officers, well, it's me, and pretty much nobody else. Everybody else seems to be staying on, but new people. Kathy Epler, who will speak next, is the incoming president. And I've promised I will help her, but she will be wonderful. We're leaving the organization in excellent hands. Desmond Baker is the vice president. He's continuing in that role, and secretary. Jennifer Ying is the ACLU treasurer. She stepped in when the treasurer, Patty Downing, had to step away from the position this year earlier in January, March, May, recently, before her term was up. Tom O'Brien is the treasurer of the ACLU Foundation and is the financial committee chair, without whom I don't know what we would do. He's made everything easier and clearer and understandable. And finally, the inimitable Peggy Strine, who is our national board representative, and she continues in that role. I want to thank all of those people for their work. I want to say that it has been my great honor to serve as the president of the ACLU of Delaware, and I feel confident in the new leadership, the staff, Mike Brickner and Kathy Epler and the board. It's going to be great. So thank you very much. Kathy, you are on deck. No, I'm wrong. It's Tom O'Brien. It looks like Kathy, but no.
Yes, people often confuse us, Catherine. Thank you, and thank you for your leadership and for your kind words. Mike asked me to give me a brief look at the financials for the chapter. And like any good financial presentation, they're very small numbers you can't read. But the main messages I'll convey to you is that thanks to your support, the financial state of the chapter is really pretty solid. The kind of blue bars on the left chart are our revenue, and you can see that 2020 was a very strong year. We did budget a little conservatively for 2021 fiscal year, which began April 1st, given the strains of COVID and the uncertainty in the economy and the employment picture. We want to be realistic about how folks may be impacted by that. The orange bar there, though, is the money that we're essentially putting back into programs and into the people of the ACLU, and that's growing, and that's intentional. You know, we're going to be spending a little more than we're bringing in this year, but as you'll hear later in the presentation, you'll want us to. There's a lot of great things going on, and you know, you give us the money so that we can spend it. So that's definitely what we're going to do as wisely as we can, but we really can continue the work even through tough economic times. The other point I'll make before turning it over is on the right. Again, the bars, blue bars are good there, that's our assets. And gray bar is good, that's our assets minus our liabilities. So you can see we're really fairly well situated. And if you can't squint to see the number, it's right around $1.9 million, our net positive position at the moment. So, you know, that's a very enviable position. And I'm happy to say that that fund is really conservatively invested. You know, we're not riding up and down with the stock market, thankfully. But we really want to take good care of the money you're entrusting us with so we can turn it over into positive programs that you'll hear a lot about in the next couple minutes. So again, thank you for your support, and we look for your continued support. And with that, I turn it to our incoming board president, Kathy Epler, who may be on mute.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. This is a fabulous turnout that we're having today. It's better than the last couple of live versions of our annual meeting. And as Catherine and Tom and Mike have said, we're looking forward to a really busy but challenging year. I got to know the staff as a brief stint as the interim director, and I can say with great confidence that they are intrepid and they are busier than ever. Who would have thought that COVID would have challenged us even in our day-to-day ACLU work? The other thing I wanted to just briefly mention is when you saw the officers list, you saw Adriana Bone listed as our Equity and Inclusion Officer. And I think that's going to be a really important position for the ACLU this year as we move forward with Black Lives Matter. Some of the challenges we're meeting in the prisons in Southern Delaware, and an increased sensitivity in the community to exactly bringing everybody up to an equal and respectful place within the community. And finally, I just want to say that we'll be communicating with you as frequently as we can this year. We'll probably send out the same amount of newsletters, but maybe a couple more blasts with what's going on, because believe me, when you hear from the staff, you will see they have their plates full and then some. And we always, as a board, welcome input from our membership. You can always reach us at the ACLU. I've sent my cards out to a lot of people. You can call Mike and he can forward the information on to me. But I think communication is a two-way street, and I think it's really important for us to hear from you as the members on exactly how we're doing. So with that, I will turn it back over to our next speaker. Siobhan and Dubard, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Javon Rich. I am the policy advocate for the ACLU of Delaware, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the Campaign for Smart Justice. So 2 years ago, we launched the Delaware Campaign for Smart Justice with the goal of reducing the prison population by half and eliminating the racial bias and disparities in the criminal justice system. To understand Delaware's mass incarceration problem, our state incarcerates at a higher rate than our neighboring larger states, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, or Pennsylvania. And Black families continue to be the most affected, with Black Delawareans constituting only 23% of the state's population and 60% of the state's prison population. So that is 60% of the state's prison population. In 2018, the campaign successfully mobilized the community around the Delaware Attorney General's race, changing the narrative of the primary campaign and election to focus on reform. In 2019, we were able to harness the power of a coalition of community stakeholders and agencies and community members to prioritize criminal justice reform and push a historic legislative agenda that led to the passage of 11 out of 19 criminal justice reform bills that will have a monumental impact on the administration of justice in Delaware and in reducing the prison population for years to come. These bills included creating expanded adult expungement opportunities and concurrent sentencing. So even talking about that makes me excited. So imagine how everybody was entering the 2020 legislative session, focusing on the remaining 8 criminal justice bills of the original 19 that were introduced in 2019. This included a sentencing bill to remove drug crimes from the violent felony list. It allowed for expanded opportunities for sentencing modification and a fines and fees bill. However, the legislative session was indefinitely postponed in March. By May, we had learned that the legislative session would resume, but on a very limited basis to allow for the passing of a budget and other COVID-19 specific bills. But that did not stop our advocacy work, even though the legislative session ended or was truncated. Given the danger of COVID-19 for vulnerable communities, like those living and working in prisons, the very people that we are advocating for every day, we, the ACLU, along with our coalition members, volunteers, and community members, shifted our advocacy focus to emergency reforms to reduce the flow of individuals into the criminal justice system, requesting that the state release as many currently incarcerated individuals as possible where it is safe to do so, and promote transparency from all criminal justice agencies about their COVID-19 response. Just thinking about it, prisons, given their nature, make the people who live and work with them a very high-risk environment for this virus to thrive. So we advocated for free visitation or calls for incarcerated people. We advocated for PPE for all incarcerated individuals and staff, universally available testing for all incarcerated people, and again, asking them to release people where it was safe to do so, like those who were scheduled to be released soon, people who are being held pre-trial just because they cannot afford bail, those incarcerated on probation violations for things that are not even a new crime, as well as review opportunities for immediate release of anyone over the age of 60 or is medically fragile. Now, Delaware took some states to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, but not enough. And some measures were implemented too late. As a result, 7 people have passed from COVID-19 in the custody of the Department of Correction, putting Delaware at the 4th highest rate of death of incarcerated people, as reported by the Marshall Project. And just this week, as Mike introduced us with, the Department of Correction reported that 1/3 of a state prison, so over 300 people, had tested positive following an outbreak. Now, we will continue to advocate for the safety of those living and working in the state's correctional facilities for always, but especially during this time. The next part, I was thinking of where do I put this in the spiel because we're in such a hard time, but I'm really happy to report today that we have seen Delaware meet our expected goal of a reduction in the prison population each year by 10% since we have started. So we must continue to ensure that we apply the pressure to, keep the pressure on the needle. Now, my colleague, Dubar McGriff, the Campaign for Smart Justice organizer, will talk with you about how we are looking forward.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dubar McGriff. I'm the community organizer with the Campaign for Smart Justice. What's next? What lies ahead? So we are continuing our advocacy efforts around fines and fees and sentencing changes in laws. We're going to continue that throughout this session, talking with legislators and different entities to end that. But what's coming up next, the big thing is probation reform. We're planning to release our probation report in August. I would say around mid-August, along with a couple other things, a website launching and a few other things. Did you know that 1 out of 23 Delawareans are on some type of supervision? That's serious. And the recidivism rate is around 70% of people that were coming back and forth for probation violations and things like that. But through COVID, we have seen probation just cease. So we're actually sort of advocating on, the crime rate has went up that we know of with COVID being existing in this new world. So how can we keep things as far as probation and not violating people not violating people of probation at an alarming rate. And also we want to begin to stopping aggressive policing in communities of color, which is ending the governor's task force and sort of altering the Safe Streets community unit. Policing reform, that's next on our agenda too. That's what lies ahead. So we're also, we just formed a subcommittee of 6 coalition members from our Smart Justice Coalition, along with 2 lawyers that recently joined. I want to thank Amy Zimmerman from our from our ACLU board for connecting us with great lawyers that can help us on this policing work. We want to definitely get out into the community and spread the word with supporting grassroots organizations that are popping up through this work that has happened through the harsh death of George Floyd. We have seen a bunch of grassroots organizations popping up within the community and people and different leaders coming up. So we want to help them organize around a general transformative mission that will really go for some good transformative change inside of our state. So we'll still be working on legislative policies that were recommended from our coalition and community members that came up with quite a few. So the coalition, the subcommittee, the policing subcommittee will be working on them things to hold people accountable and around policy changes and legislative changes within the policing system. We will also want to end invasive policing tactics, that primary in communities of color, and try to reinvest some of those funds when we end those tactics inside of the community. So we have a lot ahead of us. We're still mapping it out due to this extremely left hook that we just caught, but we're still maintaining, and we have a strong coalition. I would like to thank our Smart Justice Coalition members, along with our interns and volunteers, for helping us shift into this new work that we have now had to alter. And I think that it's going to be good. So I'd like you all, before we end, to join our live poll of to see what kind of police reform would you like to see. Would you like to see changed in the state of Delaware? Remove law enforcement officers. The first one is to remove law enforcement officers from schools. The second is to require law enforcement officers to wear body cams. The third is to discriminalize drug offenses. The fourth is to make data public on stop, arrest, and use of force. The fourth or fifth is legalizing cannabis. The sixth is discriminalizing sex work. So I have and we have a couple more. Treat law enforcement treat law enforcement disciplinary records and use of force reports as public records. The one before that, I'm sorry, I missed it. Establish an independent community review board, and then we'll end the eighth one, I think, I'm sorry, is in civil asset forfeiture. And the last one is in the criminalization of poverty, penalties for inability to pay fines and fees. So you can either do this by cooperating in our Zoom box, or if you are logged into Facebook, just put your recommendation inside of the Facebook chat, and we'll be sure to get past you. Oh, it's up there already. Is that it? So I'd like to pass it now to our legal department, Karen Lance.
Actually, I think it's my turn to bark.
Oh, I'm sorry, Shannon.
It's okay. This is Shannon Griffin. I am the policy advocate and community organizer for education equity work. Hello and welcome everyone joining by Zoom and Facebook. I'd like to highlight a couple of our education equity initiatives. Hopefully most of you are aware of our work to pass SB 85 in 2018, a law that reforms school disciplinary practices in Delaware public schools. SB 85 is now referred to as the School Discipline Improvement Plan, or SDIP. There's a couple key provisions in this law. The first is that it requires transparency. The Delaware Department of Education is required to publish discipline data on October 31st of every year by race, gender, English language learners, special education, incidents, and durations. The other provision is that schools have to develop a corrective action plan. They're required for schools that have hit a threshold of 20% or more greater disparity in among any of the disaggregated groups. And then those plans are supposed to be ready for implementation during the 2021-2022 school year. They have to be approved by the local school boards, and they must have been crafted with involvement from educators, school administrators, parents, and students. To get more detailed discipline data and to find out what schools are on the list, you can go to the Delaware Department of Education's climate page, and we can provide the website in our chat room and in our Facebook comment section. I'm excited about the work we're also working on in support of the School Discipline Improvement Plan, and that's our Fair Discipline Curriculum Training Series. It was developed by Delaware educators and social justice advocates and modeled after national best practices. 6 topics that we offer on the educators and parent track. I'm sorry. Some of those topics are analyzing data and disrupting the discipline cycle, building inclusive communities through restorative practices, engaging families in understanding trauma, parents and teachers working together, understand school discipline, racial disproportionality, and the school to prison pipeline. This year, 2019-2020 school year, we conducted a pilot in the Red Clay School District in 3 schools, thanks to the leadership of Darrell Green, Red Clay Superintendent, and Tawanda Bond, Red Clay's Director of Equity and Strategic Partnership. Educator attendance averaged 35 each session. Parents and attendance averaged 12. 95% of the participants strongly agree that the training was useful in developing their school's disciplinary corrective action plan. 93% of the educators strongly agreed that the training helped them to examine their own thinking and practice. We hope to be able to expand our training to other districts shortly. And now here's a quick poll question for everyone. There are 221 schools in Delaware. According to 2018-2019 discipline data, how many are required to implement discipline corrective action plans? Your options are A, 23, 1, 23, 2, 43, or 3, 73. Zoom participants can answer directly in the pop-up screen Folks joining by Facebook can provide your answers in the comment section. You have 60 seconds. Okay, we've got a lot of informed folks here. So the correct answer is 43. There were 43 schools that encompass elementary, middle, and high schools across the state. Next slide, please. You may be aware of an initiative to remove school resource officers from schools. We have joined that effort. ACLU has joined the movement Counselors Not Cops, which is calls for funds to be redirected from school resource officers and constables to more effective measures like counselors, crisis, trauma, therapists, community-based mediators. SROs, that are school resource officers, do not make schools safe. In fact, a mounting body of research shows that they actually cause more harm, especially to students of color and students with special education classifications. This is not about good or bad cops, or good or bad apples, or demeaning anyone serving in our schools. This is about shifting from a culture of law and order to a more inclusive and supportive environment. SROs are not the best strategy. There are better ways to keep our schools safe. The ACLU has partnered with the Building People Power campaign. We've created a school board questionnaire, and we've launched an online petition. Recently, we supported a red clay resolution to remove SROs and establish an advisory council to further examine this issue and make specific recommendations. Special thanks to Adriana Bohm for her tireless work for equity as a red clay school board member. She passionately advocates to improve educational outcomes for all students, but especially those that have been systemically underserved for far too long. To learn more, to join the movement, please feel free to go to our website at aclu-de.org. And now I'll turn it over to Karen Lance, our legal director.
Good evening, everybody. Have I managed to successfully unmute myself? Okay, good. First, before I launch into my assigned topic, I just wanted to take a minute to say what an amazing honor and privilege it is to be the Legal and Policy Director of the ACLU of Delaware. This is the most amazing staff that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And then as a bonus, we also have an amazing board, amazing members and partners and community coalitions. And I'm thankful every day for the opportunity to do what I do with the people that I do it with. And I was asked this evening to give a quick update to all of our members and other interested folks about the biggest case on our docket, which is In Re Delaware Public Schools litigation. It is the lawsuit that we brought 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. It was originally called Delawareans for Educational Opportunity versus Kearney. The plaintiffs in the case are a group of Delaware parents of school children, as well as the Delaware NAACP conference. And we filed suit in January of 2018, a complaint with 2 major claims, one primarily focused on state level officials and state level education funding, and one aimed at the county governments and local funding for schools. The first thing that happened in the case is that all the parties made a motion to dismiss, and in November of 2018, the Court of Chancery ruled in our favor on those motions and allowed our case to proceed. And a lot has happened since then. In July of 2019, there was a full trial on the county track of the case, which has to do primarily with outdated property assessments. And in May of 2020, the Vice Chancellor issued a ruling in favor of the plaintiffs on that portion of the case. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means coming up. But just to sort of finish the timeline, we are now hurtling towards a 3-week trial in November of 2020 on the part of our case that addresses state funding for public education. It's going to be an exciting adventure for all of us, as we are not sure what COVID-19 is going to mean for how trials are conducted here in the state of Delaware in November. But we're still preparing. It might be a little bit of a unique event for all of us. So just to talk a little bit more about the county track of the case, this was the portion of the case that tried to address the problem of property assessments in Delaware being 34 or more years old. Kent County, it wins the award for the most recent assessment. Its assessment was in 1987. Newcastle County most recently assesses property in 1983, and then Sussex County was sometime in the 70s. I always forget the exact date. And in the county track of the case, we were challenging these outdated assessments, and the court ruled in our favor on the merits, in favor of the plaintiffs, saying that this was a violation both of the state statute that required counties to assess their properties at their true value in money, which essentially means their market value, which is a far cry from where they were assessed in the 70s and the 80s. And also the state constitution, which requires that taxpayers be treated uniformly. And so what happens when your property assessments are this old is that if Tom O'Brien and I both bought houses in the 1980s that were worth $30,000 for each of our houses in the 1980s, and now mine is worth $100,000, but his is worth $300,000, we're still both paying our county taxes based on that $30,000 assessment from decades ago, despite the fact that his house is now worth dramatically more than mine. So that violates the uniformity clause of our state constitution. So the reason that this property tax issue was part of our school funding case is that these very outdated property assessments affect school funding in a couple of ways. One is that, as you're probably all aware, schools have to go out for referendums for more funding on a pretty regular basis every few years. And that's just so that they can keep up with inflation and increased enrollment. And if, like most other states and counties in the country, our counties had a rolling reassessment or reassessed every 3 to 5 years, some of that tax base for the schools would rise gradually in line with increases in property values and increases in development. And they do not. The school's tax base is frozen back in the 1970s and the 1980s. And then the other reason it matters for schools is sort of the same thing that I was talking about the different changes in values of property. Some parts of the state have increased in value dramatically since the 1970s and 80s, and some have hovered around the same or risen just slightly. The most dramatic example of that is in Sussex County, where the eastern part of the state, all of the property values have sort of skyrocketed, and the western part of the state has more or less stayed the same. And the state distributes money called equalization money that is supposed to help account for those differences in property values. But since our assessments are frozen in the 1970s and 80s, it's very hard for the state to make the distribution of those funds equitable. The implication for property owners, the remedy for this, for the counties being out of compliance with statute and constitution, the most obvious one is for them to perform a reassessment. What does that mean for property owners? By statute, If the counties reassess, it is supposed to be revenue neutral, which means that the amount of money that they take in is supposed to remain the same, with the exception of a small additional bump to help cover the cost of doing the reassessment. For individual property owners, it means that some people's taxes may go up and some people's taxes may go down, but that is just in line with the way that property has appreciated or depreciated and the true value of those properties in today's dollars. So essentially, when Tom and I were both paying on that $30,000 value in 1983, I was subsidizing Tom's taxes because I was paying more than I should have, and he was paying less than I should have. You're welcome, Tom. And doing a reassessment would correct that inequity. I've gone way over my time already, and I only got halfway through the case. So quickly, what's next? That part of the case is actually stayed until October, so you'll have to tune back in and we'll tell you what's happening next in the county track. In the state track, the main claim was that Delaware, oh no, I'm not allowed to talk about it. I gotta go straight to the poll. Oh wait, oh gosh, now it's voting rights. Morgan, you're killing me. Okay, I'm gonna do the state track in 1 minute. Our essential claim is that Delaware is failing in its state constitutional obligation to provide all students with a meaningful opportunity to obtain an adequate education, one that will enable them to participate as active citizens in a democracy, to be employed in a modern economy, and to enjoy the benefits, I think that sentence got cut off, but like of our culture and society. Up until 2018, Delaware did not provide any additional funding for low-income students or English language learner students, unlike the majority of the rest of the states in our country. And it is our argument that we do need to systematically be providing these additional supports for students who arrive at the schoolhouse door on average. Obviously, this is a generalization, it's not true to everyone, but that they may have additional needs, but that is our responsibility as a state and as a society to provide those children with the support and the tools that they need so that they can be just as successful as any of their more advantaged peers. And we are failing, and it is time to step up. Our case does not have any explicit race-based claim in it, but certainly the history of who has and does not have in our education system has been greatly influenced by race. And at this moment in our country, when we are reckoning with some of that past, it is time also to take a good hard look at our education system and make sure that we are providing an equitable opportunity for all of Delaware's children. That's all I got. Let's move to the poll. All right. So for those of you on Zoom, you can vote on your screen. For those of you on Facebook, you're welcome to type some ideas into the comments, and we will certainly take a look at them. The question is, what do you think is the most important additional resource for increasing success and opportunity for disadvantaged children? 1 is smaller class sizes and individualized tutoring. 2 is increased mental health and social work staff positions in schools. 3 is quality after school and summer programs to help students catch up and get ahead. 4 is access to free, universal, voluntary, high quality preschool. 5 is all of the above, and 6 is none of the above. And because I've run over, I suspect that Morgan is going to tally these results, so choose quickly. All right, let's see. By far, the winner of our audience this evening is that all of the above are important ingredients for increasing success and opportunity for disadvantaged children. And I'm gonna kick it over now to our staff attorney extraordinaire, Dwayne Bensing. Take it away, Dwayne.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Karen. Again, my name is Dwayne Bensing. I'm the new staff attorney at the ACLU of Delaware. Let me go ahead and put an asterisk on that because until I pass the bar in September, I'm not yet barred in the state of Delaware. So big shout out to Karen. She's actually our only barred attorney at the ACLU of Delaware. Small but mighty staff we have, and I rely on her tremendously. So thank you, Karen. This is the 2020 year, which means we have got an election coming up. You might have noticed. And in the times of COVID, what does that mean? We know that going back into the presidential primary, we were covered by Governor Carney's executive order that allowed people to vote by absentee. That covered the presidential primary election, but did not cover the upcoming elections that we have in September and November. So I have some good news, some bad news, and then some other news, right? So going back, the slide before, Morgan, House Bill 346 has passed and been signed by Governor, and that is going to cover our 2020 elections. What this means for you is that you may vote by mail in the 2020 primary election, general election, or any special elections that we have coming up. You're going to receive an application from the State Elections Commissioner to receive a vote by mail ballot. Any registered voter in the state of Delaware will be eligible to cast a ballot by mail. Of course, those of you who are eligible to cast an absentee ballot, that will still apply to this election as well. The vote by mail procedures are going to mirror what we've been doing in the absentee. So those of you that voted by absentee in the presidential primary, it's going to be a very similar process where you fill it out, put it in an envelope that's prepaid, postage paid, and send it back. You're going to be able to check the status of that ballot, whether it was received, whether it's been sent, whether it was counted, using the state election website. So that's a good security element of House Bill 346 to help get us through this crisis that we have right now so that you can vote from the safety of your home. But HB 346 is not enough. It's important to know that it's a quick fix. We can go to our next slide, and we need a long-term solution. We need to make sure that we have the opportunity to vote by mail in the safety of our homes in all future elections, not just in the 2020 elections. We need a procedure that is consistent and not a patchwork of absentee and vote by mail and with different applications. We need to have a permanent, consistent, safe, and secure, universally available procedure for all voters in the state of Delaware. So we certainly support expanding what the legislature has already done and expanding vote by mail opportunities, which may include a constitutional amendment that permits no excuse absentee voting. That's certainly the easiest way to go about this, to make sure that we have broader access to the ballot for all voters so that you don't have to risk your health and safety in these unpredictable times. So HB 346, as I said, does cover the upcoming elections. I have those dates for you, the registration deadlines and elections. August 22nd is the primary election registration deadline, so make sure you're registered by then. You can check your voter registration on ivote.de.gov. I went ahead and put that link in the chat for you, and I'll put it on Facebook as well. So check your voter registration there. The primary election, this is for state elections, not the presidential primary. We already had that, but for governor and state races, as well as the Senate and U.S. representative races, that primary election will be September 15th. And then your registration deadline to vote in the general election, as Mike started us off, one of the most important elections of our lifetime. Make sure you're registered by October 10th of 2020. That election day, mark it in your calendar. Don't miss it, November 3rd, 2020. And I really encourage, I hope all of you have already got your absentee or vote by mail ballots already in the mail way before November 3rd, because it must be received by the close of the polls. So by 8 p.m., it must be received by your elections officials to be counted. So that's an important deadline to keep in mind. One election I didn't put in there, but it's still important, and we just talked about schools with Shannon. Make sure to vote in your school board elections if those are coming up. You've got one more week to do that. I don't have those dates right in front of me, but I think next Tuesday is the deadline to get that ballot in. So please vote if you are qualified and live in one of those districts that has an election coming up. All right, let's get to our poll. How do you plan to vote in the upcoming elections? Do you plan to vote by mail or an absentee ballot? Vote at the polls or vote at the polls? I think we messed that one. Make sure you vote. Pick one. And those of you on Facebook, let us know how you plan to vote in the upcoming elections. All right, lots of you plan to vote by mail and get your absentee ballot. That's great. It's a great, safe alternative. We encourage you all to do it. Those votes will be counted. They will be secure. You will be safe. For those of you voting at the polls, wear your mask. Be safe. Thank you all. Don't forget to vote. I'm going to send it back to Mike.
Thank you so much, Dwayne, and I'm glad we ended with the voting discussion. I'm very proud to say myself and my family, we are officially now Delaware voters. We got in our voter registrations and we are set and ready to go for the rest of the elections here in 2020. You know, you heard about all of the amazing work that's happening from our board and from our staff. And you know, you're the other component here. You are the reason that we're able to do the work that we're able to do through your support. Yes, your financial support, but also all of your letters to legislators, your letters to the editor, coming to our events like this, learning about civil liberties topics and speaking to your neighbors and your friends about it. You are the lifeblood of the ACLU of Delaware. And so yes, we have some really tremendous obstacles in our path to freedom, but we have some great supporters in you all to help us get there. Your financial support does make a difference. You heard about some of the work that we do around legislative advocacy. If you're an ACLU member, that your dues go directly to all of the legislative work that we do. So when we're advocating for vote by mail in the Delaware General Assembly, or we're advocating for better police reforms and changes to our criminal justice system, that's your membership dollars at work. And if you're inspired by our litigation around education equity issues, all of our public education work, that comes from your tax-deductible donation to the ACLU of Delaware. So if you're interested in and moved to donate or to join tonight, please go to our website. You can do that this evening. With that, I believe we're moving to questions and answers. So we have had several come in over the last while, but let me start off with one that we had for our Smart Justice team. So this one comes from Doug, and Doug asked, well, he said this was his first interaction with the ACLU, so welcome, Doug. We're so glad that you're here. But he was wondering, what plan of action is currently in place to address racial disparities in the sentencing of individuals in the justice system?
All right, I'll take a shot at the first part. Any of my other colleagues can fill in. But one thing that we look at in regards to addressing racial disparities is looking at, you know, what laws or policies exacerbate the racial disparities, especially for people who end up being sentenced and going to jail. So one of the policies that we looked at in 2019 was related to, you know, like drug-free school zone laws, right? So that mandated a sentence enhancement for people who are caught selling drugs in designated school areas, not just schools, but like near churches. And then you didn't even have to sell drugs on the property. It could be like within 300 feet of the school. So if you look at that and think about which population is more likely to be negatively impacted by it, it's by, you know, Black and Latino people and a lot of people that live within the city. So there was a bill passed in 2019 that would, you know, reduce some of those limitations that would, or reduce the areas that would mandate a sentencing enhancement. Looking forward, we're looking at, you know, the war on drugs, reducing the volume of low-level drug offenders who are actually entering into courts for. I'm going to go ahead. I'm all for like decriminalization and legalization of marijuana. So we're putting people in court for low-level drug offenses. And one of the bills that we were advocating for in 2020, before the legislative session was truncated, would have removed many drug crimes from the violent felony list. So those are some of the ways that we looked at how sentencing, could address racial disparities. In addition to that, thinking about how previously, well, this is actually still in the books now, people would have to serve their time consecutively instead of concurrently. So we were hopeful, and we'll continue working on the next legislative session, allowing judges to have that discretion again, to allow people to serve time concurrently instead of consecutively.
Thanks, Javon. The next one I'm going to pose to Dubard, and this one comes from Emily. And Emily was actually one of the protesters who was arrested in Camden several weeks ago, and the ACLU of Delaware helped to get them released, which was really wonderful. But Emily was wondering, Dubard, what are some ways that she can get more involved or learn more about police reform initiatives?
Hey, Emily, thank you for protesting. I'm happy the ACLU was able to help you guys out in that situation. I wish I could remember the attorney's name. Karen knows who it was. Thank you so much to that attorney down in Camden. But ways you can get involved with the ACLU is we just started a Smart Justice chapter down in Kent County with Shannon Jackson. Am I correct? I can get you her information. Well, I'm gonna put my email inside of the chats so you can get more involved. But you can look at our go to our website, and we do have a couple action alerts is going out, and that's the best way you can get involved really with this stuff. But I would suggest if you really want to get involved deeply, join one of our Smart Justice chapter down in Kent County.
Thank you so much, Dubard. I have another question. This one is for Shannon. So Shannon, Mary, who's actually watching us on Facebook Live, hi Mary, she was wondering why those 43 schools were required, but not the other ones in Delaware.
Great question, Mary. So the reason is because of the thresholds that I mentioned. So a school had to be over 20% in any of those given categories. So meaning a school had to be suspending, say, 20% more African-American or African-American boys than they were white students or Asian students. So anything over the 20% threshold in any of those categories, either overall excessiveness, meaning schools were suspending 20% of their entire school population, or by group, that would kick them in. It should be noted as well that ratio, actually, that threshold will go down every year by 5 percentage points after next year.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm going to pose this next question to Karen, actually. It's on something she didn't talk about tonight, but it's related. So we had a couple questions from Doug in the chat around access to information, particularly around police interactions and police stops, and that oftentimes it may be hard to get some of those reports and to have it not be redacted. So Karen, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we experience here in Delaware for that?
Yeah, so it has been a big challenge that there is not a lot of data collected and not a lot of data publicly available about what goes on in our criminal justice system from the very beginning in the policing stage through prosecution, sentencing, and then into the prison. And data is not like a super sexy topic that anybody gets excited about talking about, but it really should underpin how we make normative decisions about how we want to change our policies. And a really good example of that, Javon was mentioning changes in drug laws. The Attorney General's office had the Statistical Analysis Center poll and analyze who was being charged with felony enhancements for drug crimes, and that there were a whole list of enhancements. She mentioned some of them about proximity to parks, churches, schools. And one of them, one of the enhancements was that a vehicle was involved in your drug crime. And they found this enormous racial disparity in most of the people who were being upcharged felonies for like possessing the same amounts of drugs were people of color, and often it was because I guess they were stopped or arrested in a vehicle, and that counted as an enhancement. So thankfully, our Attorney General said this doesn't make any sense and supported a change to the drug laws that removed that enhancement. But it's just sort of an example. That analysis would never have gotten done if the Attorney General's office had not asked for it to be done. No outside person would have been able to get that data. And in fact, I saw recently, just in 2019, a Dover Post reporter asked for statewide data on traffic stops, including demographic racial data on who was getting stopped and for what. And that the request was denied. For a variety of reasons. They said they would have to create a whole new record in order to answer his question, and that it was part of an investigative or traffic report, and that those there are exceptions for producing those under our Freedom of Information Act law. And Mike has told me stories of in Ohio about all the things that you can just ask for and you just get it, and it's like this amazing dreamland of Ohio. Who knew? So yeah, that is a place in Delaware that I think is a really fundamental and important step for other reforms that we could build on. It's hard to make the case for the reforms that you think are necessary if you don't have the data. And it should be a real easy issue, because as far as I can make out, regardless of normatively what you think criminal justice or policing policies should be, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you are. So we would welcome some allies in a push for more open transparency laws, and also data collection requirements at the very front end. A lot of the agencies don't even systematically record some of this data, and you can't analyze it if nobody has it. That was a long-winded answer. I'm gonna stop talking.
But it's an important topic, right? If you don't have access to the information, it's hard to make change, right? So I'm so glad that you asked that question, Doug. We have a question here for Dwayne. So Dwayne, Mike is wondering, so he says the Department of Elections is way behind in mailing ballots out for the school district elections. Does that give us some pause for the primary and the November elections? And what should voters do if they're finding that their absentee ballot might be taking a little bit of time to get to them?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks, Mike, for your comment. It definitely highlights or underscores the importance of making sure that you're on top of tracking your absentee ballot application, whether it has been mailed, and whether it's been received once you've sent it back to the Department of Elections. Don't wait to the last minute. This is going to take time for the Department of Elections to do. Any reports out there of absentee ballot not being sent to you, if it's been requested, you need to report that immediately to the Department of Elections. If there are any other obstacles that you think the ACLU should be aware of, please let us know. Reach out to us. We'll be monitoring whether the Department of Elections can live up to its obligation to ensure voter access. But it's really important that voters don't wait until the last minute, because when you're voting by mail, it's an application that has to be received by the Department of Elections. Then they have to send you that ballot, and then you have to return that ballot. And remember, the deadline is 8 p.m. election day. So that's for the primary and for the general election. So you've got to make sure that you give yourself enough time for the mail to process, for the Department of Elections to receive your application, and all of that. So don't delay and get those applications in and ballots returned as soon as possible.
Thanks, Dwayne. I have two more questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So I have to give a little bit of preference. So Katie, whose last name might also be related to my last name, asked in the chat, how do we hold elected officials accountable for policing reforms? How do we make sure that they follow through with promises? Any of our smart justice team?
Well, one way that you can hold them accountable is, show up to their office. I mean, it's COVID-19 time, so maybe you can't show up at their office, but you can call them. You can email them, especially for candidates who, ran on a platform where they want to ensure equity and a fair justice system for all. So, even though they have been voted in, they may have been voted in on a platform, that seems to be equitable, but we have to keep reminding them, what they said. So continue to show up, advocate, write letters about things that are important. But another thing is voting, right? So voting is a way to hold your elected official accountable. If your elected official is doing things that is ensuring that your police department is being transparent and is engaging with the community in a fair way, vote for that candidate if that appears to be the case. But if you approach your candidate and they are not for reform or for transparent and fair government, then that you might want to reconsider, if you want to vote for that candidate. So, showing up, writing letters, calling, but also how you vote is activism and says a lot.
Thanks, Javon. And so speaking of voting, last question goes to Dwayne. Dwayne, we had a question from Kay on Facebook, and she wanted to know why voter ID might be a barrier for some voters, particularly voters of color.
Great question, and thanks for asking that. So we want to make sure that all registered voters have the opportunity to cast their ballot. Voter ID is an obstacle that keeps people who would otherwise be eligible to vote from access to the polls. We know that disproportionately low-income people and people of color, other communities are disenfranchised when they have to produce additional documentation in order to exercise their fundamental right to vote. And so we oppose those kinds of obstacles. And so we just know from the research that has been done in Supreme Court cases that have been brought that show that low-income voters and voters of color disproportionately lack access to the kinds of documents that are often required in these voter ID bills. And so it's really important that we keep that access as open as possible without any additional unnecessary obstacles. People can show who they are. There's not this widespread voter fraud happening for people that are voting either in person or by mail. And so it's just really important that we keep our voter rolls accurate, but also open.
Thanks, Dwayne. And yeah, we're lucky in Delaware in that we are not a strict photo ID state. We allow people to use other types of ID. I know from some of my friends and colleagues, I have a friend who organized in Wisconsin where they have a very strict photo ID. People that she would help would oftentimes have to make a minimum of 5 trips to the BMV just to be able to get all of the documents that they needed for their photo ID. And so it can oftentimes be a big hurdle. So I want to thank all of you again for sticking with us an extra 13 minutes. And I want to thank our great board members. We're so happy to welcome Hanif and Ariel to the board, and we're so excited about the new leadership on our board as well. And I am just so in awe of the rest of our staff and the great work that they do every single day. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you at another ACLU of Delaware event very soon. Thanks, everybody.